Oh, my God!
I'll be damned, man. Now, that's heavy.
That is heavy! He brought out a nugget, man.
That was a heavy nut.
That was a heavy nut.
The gorge was never meant to be conquered. Locals called it a dead man's canyon, a place where flash floods roar without warning, rock walls crumble silently, and snowmelt torrents turn trails into death traps. For generations, miners whispered about the gorge. Some swore they saw gold glittering in the spray. Others left journals that ended mid-sentence. Men went in, but most never came back. And now, Dustin Hurt was stepping straight into its jaws. Every step he took carried risk. Every swing of the pickaxe could trigger disaster. Yet Dustin pressed on, driven by the promise of gold that no one else dared chase. And when the first glint appeared, he knew the legends were real. What lay in that canyon was more than anyone expected, an $85 million jackpot. The crew froze. Fans went wild. The Dead Man's Canyon had finally given up its secret. And Dustin Hurt had done what no one else could. Make sure to smash that like button and subscribe, because this is just the start of a discovery that could rewrite Gold Rush history. While Parker Schnabel and Tony Beats played it safe on predictable ground, Dustin gambled everything on this cursed ravine. To him, it wasn't just a risk. It was the last untouched frontier. From above, granite cliffs rose like castle walls, polished by centuries of rushing water. The gorge looked more like a fortress designed to keep men out than a place that could ever surrender gold. The only way in was by ropes, harnesses, and helicopter drops, an operation more like military assault than mining. His crew muttered about madness, some even calling it suicide, but Dustin's fire was unshakable. He told them this was no ordinary claim. This was destiny. And when drone footage revealed faint shimmer beneath the white water, specks of light glinting from the riverbed, the crew went silent. Gold was down there, but so was death. Still, they pressed on. Panning tests in calmer side pools revealed something no one expected: concentrations of gold flakes nearly 20 times richer than an average Alaskan creek. Every swirl of the pan seemed to flash with impossible promise. And then came the relics, rusted shovels, eaten into the stone itself, timbers so ancient they crumbled at a touch, later carbon dated back to the 1800s. Men had been here before, men who had tried and failed. Yet something about the way boulders were stacked, water channels diverted, suggested more than blind luck. This was deliberate engineering. Someone had been moving the gorge itself to harvest gold. The mystery deepened with a single discovery: a weathered spiral carved into a granite face, curling inward like an ancient code. Was it the mark of a secret society, Russian fur traders, or a forgotten Masonic order? Nobody knew. But in a soaked leather pouch, Dustin found torn scraps of an old surveyor's log dated 1893, warning of veins locked beneath the gorge wall. Suddenly, the obsession wasn't just Dustin's. It spread like fever across the camp. The gorge wasn't just a gamble anymore. It was a map, a puzzle, and a dare. But to solve it, Dustin had to do the impossible. He drilled anchor points into sheer bedrock, rigging rope and pulley systems adapted from cave rescue manuals. The crew spent days hauling gear over jagged cliff edges, slipping on ice, hands raw from rope burns. Fatigue carved deep into their faces, and every step carried risk. Ice storms slammed without warning, sending loose rock avalanches hissing across their lines. Helicopters struggled to deliver supplies. One miscalculated drop sent crates of food and diesel tumbling into the torrent below, swallowed instantly. Morale cracked. One crewman finally snapped, throwing down his harness and calling it suicidal treasure hunting. But Dustin didn't let him leave. Instead, he opened his hand to reveal a test pan shimmering with raw nuggets. The message was clear. Gold was here, real, heavy, undeniable, enough to break men or make them legends. As he wiped the pan clean, a subtle sparkle on the gorge wall caught his eye. Leaning closer, Dustin traced the faint streak of gold, barely visible at first, glinting through the granite. The crew fell silent, drawn by the promise of what lay ahead. Every rope-burned hand, every slip on ice, every near miss with falling rock had been leading to this moment. The shimmer grew more pronounced with each careful strike of the drill, and anticipation replaced exhaustion, though caution still gripped every member of the team. The drill bit screeched as it cut into the gorge wall, echoing across the cliffs like a warning. Dust cleared to reveal the vein in full, dense, alive, glittering even in the weak Alaskan light. Early samples sent for testing returned at 95% purity, rivaling the legendary strikes of the Klondike more than a century ago. Excitement surged, yet the euphoria was tempered by the harsh memory of the gorge's history. The gold widened as it plunged deeper, suggesting an underground network, far beyond their expectations. The crew erupted into cheers, but each geologist and miner understood the risk. The gorge demanded respect. Every piece of equipment, every drill strike, every careful maneuver had been a test of endurance and skill. It was the same lead, the same dream, the same danger that had swallowed men whole more than a century ago. Then the gorge itself shifted. A storm rolled in, hammering rain against the cliffs, and the ground trembled as rock gave way under the weight of water and loosened stone. A section of the wall collapsed in a deafening crash, and when the dust cleared, it revealed something no one had expected. A narrow opening sealed away for generations, hidden by nature's camouflage. Dustin forced his way through first, ducking into the darkness as his headlamp flickered across jagged stone. What he saw silenced him. The cavern opened like a cathedral, its walls alive with quartz veins streaked with visible gold, every surface glinting as if stars had been trapped underground. The sound of dripping water echoed with a haunting rhythm, every drop magnified into a slow, deliberate beat. As they pushed deeper, the crew noticed something even stranger. The walls weren't all natural. Ancient timbers, blackened with age, jutted from the stone, supports clearly placed by human hands. Whoever had worked here had tried to tame the cavern, only to abandon it. And on the walls, half-washed symbols smeared in faded paint told a story no one could decipher. Circles, spirals, crude arrows, some overlaid with marks resembling claim stakes, but arranged in cryptic patterns. The air grew colder, heavier. One miner whispered that they had walked into a tomb, a burial chamber for the men who had come before and never escaped. Superstition gnawed at the crew's nerves, but Dustin cut through the unease. He declared it was no tomb, no grave. It was a vault designed to hide unimaginable wealth. The proof came fast. Behind a collapsed wall of rubble, Dustin's team uncovered solid shapes fused with mineral growth. Sledgehammers rang against hardened crust, each swing sending shards flying until finally the forms revealed themselves. Crates, sealed tight, locked in stone for over 100 years. The wood had fossilized under pressure, the corners bound by iron bands streaked orange with rust. Breaking them open was like smashing open time itself. The first chest cracked and spilled brilliance across the cavern floor. Gold ingots, stamped with assay marks from the 19th century, stacked like bricks, bags of raw nuggets their edges sharp, untouched by refining fire, tumbled out in a rush of yellow. Scattered among them were coins, dozens at first, then hundreds, their designs unmistakable, Spanish doubloons, some bearing the worn faces of monarchs long gone. A second crate yielded Russian Orthodox icons, icons trimmed in gilt, their origins stretching across oceans. The third held British sovereigns, minted at a time when the empire's shadow touched every corner of the earth. Each artifact whispered of journeys and smuggling routes that converged here in this impossible gorge. But it wasn't only treasure. Wedged in the bottom of one chest, Dustin found scraps of ledgers. The ink faded, but still legible enough to send a chill through the air. Names of companies, coded shipments, numbers tied to transactions never declared. They spoke of a secret consortium that funneled fortune through Alaska, bypassing taxes and governments, building empires in the shadows. The crates weren't just gold. They were evidence of a hidden economy, a clandestine network that had once controlled wealth across continents. The realization settled over the crew like a weight heavier than gold. This wasn't just a jackpot. This was a revelation, a discovery that redefined history, and one that could rewrite the story of the entire gold rush itself. The cavern, the vein, the hoard, it wasn't simply luck. It was a legacy, and Dustin Hurt had just torn it open. Whispers rippled through the team, a mixture of awe and apprehension. "We need to document this properly," one miner said, eyes still fixed on the fragile ledger. Dustin nodded, understanding immediately. The scale of what they had uncovered demanded verification, measurement, and preservation. Within hours, helicopters thundered overhead, lowering specialists into the gorge. Cases packed with scales, acid kits, magnifiers, and precise instruments were deployed. Independent geologists crouched beside numismatists and jewelers, their faces a mirror of disbelief as they examined the crates. Every bar of gold, every coin, every nugget was treated like a priceless artifact. Samples were scraped and tested, weights measured with surgical precision. As each ingot was tallied, bags of nuggets poured out like river gravel, coins spread across tarps until the cavern floor glittered under lamplight. With every careful calculation, the full magnitude became undeniable. Over 2,000 pounds of raw and refined gold had been recovered, conservatively valued at more than $70 million. But the gold wasn't the full story. Wrapped in canvas bundles and buried in the corners of the crates were gemstones, blood-red rubies, deep green emeralds, sapphires that caught the light like frozen fire. Each one was examined and categorized, the appraisers whispering at the rarity of such stones appearing so far from any known trade route. Then came the coins, some pristine despite their age, sealed in wax paper and marked with foreign stamps. Numismatists identified mint-condition sovereigns and rare Spanish issues worth 10, even 20 times their weight in gold. Another $15 million was added to the ledger in a single afternoon, pushing the total to an almost surreal figure, $85 million. Yet, even that number failed to capture the weight of what lay before them. Some items weren't just valuable, they were unique, carrying a historical premium no auction house could calculate. Icons etched in gold leaf, coins from vanished empires, ledgers tied to forgotten syndicates. The appraisers admitted pieces like these were priceless, artifacts that blurred the line between treasure and museum collection. Dustin's discovery was no longer just a financial coup. It was a cultural earthquake. And when word began to slip through the cracks, carried by whispers from camp staff and satellite phone leaks, the outside world ignited. Gold Rush forums lit up overnight, posts flooding in from every continent. Fans declared Dustin had eclipsed Parker Schnabel in one impossible strike. Finance blogs speculated on the legality of such a claim, while tabloids splashed headlines of $85 million jackpot found in Alaskan Gorge across their covers. By morning, Dustin Hurt's name was viral, bouncing between investment boards and mining newsletters, with some calling him reckless, others calling him a genius. In the space of a week, he had gone from underdog to the man who had outshined the kings of the gold rush. The reactions from rivals were inevitable. Parker Schnabel, ever analytical, was said to have demanded proof, muttering that no one simply stumbled onto that much wealth without embellishment. Rumors spread that he planned to send his own geologists to fact-check the claim. Tony Beets took a quieter path, contacting lawyers to scrutinize Dustin's operation. If the gorge overlapped with any old registered claims, Tony wanted first rights. Corporate mining interests descended like vultures, their representatives circling the gorge, offering buyouts or threatening to muscle in with permits and government pressure. Meanwhile, conspiracy theorists had a field day. Some claimed Dustin had tapped into a government reserve hidden since World War II. Others argued the symbols in the cavern tied to secret societies who had stashed treasure out of reach of taxation. Message boards filled with speculation, maps, and grainy photos, each one adding fuel to the frenzy. Dustin, however, brushed it all off. He wasn't about to let outsiders dictate his next move. Every ounce of treasure would be hauled out before rivals, corporations, or governments could stake a claim. But protecting $85 million in gold was no small task. Dustin converted the camp into a fortress. Armed guards patrolled 24 hours a day, rifles slung across their shoulders. Floodlights blazed across the gorge at night, throwing long shadows that made the cliffs look like battlements. Drones circled overhead, scanning the tree line, their infrared cameras catching glimpses of figures slipping back into darkness. Some intruders vanished before they could be confronted, leaving behind footprints, cigarette butts, and an eerie silence. Sabotage soon followed. Fuel tanks were discovered with drilled holes, leaking precious diesel into the soil. Rope lines were found partially cut, a disaster waiting to happen if left unnoticed. Dustin's paranoia grew as he realized the gorge wasn't just dangerous because of nature. It was now hunted ground. Beyond the perimeter, local tensions simmered. Residents of nearby towns muttered that while outsiders hauled away riches, their own families lived paycheck to paycheck. Resentment thickened into hostility, with angry words exchanged whenever crew members came down for supplies. And then came the accidents. A scaffolding collapse nearly crushed 2 workers. A rope gave way, sending a man tumbling into shallow rapids. Another miner suffered a mysterious equipment malfunction that left him pinned until rescued. The crew whispered again of the gorge's curse, muttering that the land itself punished those who tried to take too much. Every nugget lifted out seemed to raise the stakes, as though greed itself carried a cost. And in the middle of it all, Dustin Hurt stood defiant, a man clutching fortune in one hand and daring fate with the other. Each accident forced a hard truth into the team's minds. The gorge was not a place for ordinary methods. Traditional hauling could not contain the peril, and even the bravest hands were vulnerable to nature's fury. Dustin called a meeting on the edge of the cliffs, the roar of the rapids below underscoring every word. "We need a safer way to get this out," he said, scanning the vertical walls, the narrow ledges, and the rushing river. Eyes met eyes. There was no choice. Within hours, helicopters roared through the gorge, their blades slicing the freezing air, each one carrying crates of gold that had taken centuries to accumulate. Gusts funneled between cliffs, strong enough to toss a crate against rock if pilots misjudged a single angle. Dustin coordinated from the edge, stopwatch in hand, directing sling operators with precision that left no margin for error. Every flight was a test of engineering and nerve. One slip, and millions of dollars could vanish into the rapids below. Reinforced sling crates with steel frames and shock absorption pads absorbed weight and jolts, reducing sway but never removing the danger entirely. Each crate screamed against the harness, hanging as if suspended between heaven and death, a constant reminder that the gorge's curse had only evolved, not disappeared. Storms tore through the gorge like an angry beast. Helicopters plunged blindly through fog, instrument panels lit with red warnings, rotors straining against the wind. The crew below held on to ropes, shoring up anchor points, bracing against falling debris. One crate shifted mid-air. The pilot shouted, alarms blaring, and Dustin dove for the secondary rigging. His boots skidded across slick stone, gloves raw as he latched the load inches from catastrophe. The river below foamed violently, mocking their gamble. Extraction was not just work, it was war. Days stretched into nights, each sortie a pulse of adrenaline, each failure a heartbeat closer to disaster. Amid the chaos, the historical significance of their find deepened. Experts examined ledger fragments, piecing together trade routes that spanned continents. Spanish doubloons, traced back to privateers operating in the late 1700s. Russian Orthodox icons suggested clandestine smuggling across Siberia, and British sovereigns tied shipments to collapsed mercantile empires. Cross-referencing old newspapers and port manifests, historians confirmed the gorge had been part of a covert supply chain for decades, wealth moving undetected under the noses of governments and rival miners alike. Ancient survey notes matched Dustin's cavern coordinates precisely, showing that these hidden riches were mapped and intentionally concealed by miners who never survived to claim them. The crew catalogued artifact after artifact, documenting every coin, nugget, and ledger. Each entry revealed connections nobody had imagined. Payments to far-flung mercenary groups, gold funneled through secret Alaska routes to fund international ventures, even hints of early industrial espionage. The gorge was more than a treasure trove. It was a hub of global intrigue, a secret economic artery buried under centuries of snow and stone. Universities petitioned for access, museums requested loans, and Dustin found himself mediating debates over cultural preservation while still sweating over helicopter lifts and shifting weather. The gold was only one part of the story. The hidden empire it represented reshaped everything historians thought they knew about the region. As the last of the crates were lifted, Dustin turned his attention to his crew. Faces were lined with exhaustion and scars, bodies battered from falls, rope burns, and near misses. Trust had been forged in the chaos. Loyalty had been tested at every step. Some crew members were celebrating, while others silently nursed injuries, their pride intertwined with survival. Disputes over division of work and future plans bubbled to the surface, old rivalries threatening to erupt, tempered only by Dustin's presence. The man who had led them through the deadliest gorge in North America now had to navigate the human fallout of fortune. By the time the dust settled, Dustin Hurt had done more than claim $85 million. He had unearthed centuries of hidden history, tested the limits of engineering and endurance, and defined a new chapter in gold rush lore. He stood atop the cliffs, watching the final crates lifted into helicopters, aware that while fortune had been seized, the story, the true legacy of the gorge, was only beginning. His name, his crew, and the canyon itself were intertwined forever, a living testament to the cost, thrill, and immortality of discovering what others had feared to even approach.